Okay, everyone, thank you very much indeed for your patience. Now, we're moving on to a really key topic here, and that is the future of AI in sustainability. Now, I'm actually delighted we're tackling this subject relatively early in proceedings this year, because last year, I think it was relatively towards the end of day 2 when something sets in called sort of host. Well, you start to fall to bits. You start saying very strange things. You start talking about strange topics and going on very strange tangents. And I described AI as the technological elephant in the room. And it's one of those expressions, you know, when you start talking and your brain is telling you stop, don't do it. But I went there and I could see the pity on the face of everyone in the front room. But I crashed on, and it's a memory that stays with me and only keeps me awake about 50% of my nights. Anyway, we will move on. So I'm delighted to welcome Márcia Balisciano, Chief Sustainability Officer, Global Head of ESG and Corporate Responsibility at RELX. And our chat is the future of AI in sustainability. A warm welcome for Márcia, please. Thank you so much for joining us. There's a lot to talk about on this. So let's start with a little bit of background. First of all, on RELX, let's start with that background first.
Well, I probably should start with my disclaimer that on a good day, I know how my toaster works. So I'm not an AI technician, but I am fascinated by the topic and how it's been being used in our business to support our customers. In terms of my own journey, I am really lucky because I'm the founding head of this area for RELX Group. And I've been with my company for over 15 years, and I've seen the trajectory, not only that we've been on, but the progression of the topic over time across a number of industries. I've had the good fortune of serving as a chair of the UN Global Compact here in the United Kingdom, and I also serve on the board of the Foundation for the Global Compact, which is supporting the initiative globally. So I guess I had a very narrow job description when I joined the company, and our then CEO told me that my job was 2 years. He's long since retired, and occasionally I still see him, and I say, look, I'm still there. There's still more to be done. I'm perpetually nervous because you're only as good as what you do today, what you're going to do in the future. You cannot reside on past glory. And I'm interested always in where are the gaps in what good looks like and where we are relative to that performance. But I should probably back up because I know that RELX may not be so familiar to the audience, but we're actually in the top 10 of the FTSE. And if I can talk to each one of you, I would find the industry that you're in, and we will have an article, a journal, a tool, a show. So we are made up of 4 businesses. We focus on what we call our unique contributions to society, and that will be relevant to our discussion today. There's an overarching one, which is universal sustainable access to information. We also are very focused on protecting society through our risk business, looking at how we can advance science and health through our science business, also furthering the rule of law in our legal business. And then we also are interested through our events business called RX of bringing buyers and sellers together to improve the efficiency of markets, so fostering communities. And those are integral to what we do as a business.
Because I think what you say there is vital about you don't have to be a technician to understand it. You just have to know how to use it. That's the key, I suppose. But AI, huge blanket term, few different kinds of AI, and how are they used?
Yeah. So there's probably no one single definition of artificial intelligence, and all of us are very adept at using forms of AI because we've been using it without realizing that that's what we've been doing. Every time we go to a website and it recommends a product, that is using machine learning to look at people who've used a similar keyword to you, maybe buying decisions that you've made in the past on that website, to be able to analyze all of that information quickly to give you a recommendation. And actually, I was so interested to know that the first kind of attempts at artificial intelligence go back to the 1940s. And it was the idea of actually how do our brains work and can we create neural networks that understand how we understand. And so it goes, this kind of long trajectory. Alan Turing, in the early 1950s, came up with some very pivotal ideas that are still relevant today, on forward. And actually, it's so amazing that I wrote down some statistics about just how fast things are moving. So I wanted to share those. But there is something like in my example, which is called extractive AI. So that's the one we're most familiar with. And then over the last 18 months with generative AI, it does what it says on the tin. It is generating responses using natural language processing to be able to interpret human speech. And so be able to respond, and we've all maybe had a go on ChatGPT, but even more simply, if you open up and you have a recent edition of Adobe, and it's got many pages, and you can ask Adobe to synthesize that content for you and get to an answer quite quickly. If we look at how things have changed, so in 2019, Google came out with Bard, and that had 340 million parameters. And parameters are one of the major ways that we need to look at the development of AI. So parameters are another way of saying, what is the kind of neural infrastructure? What is the way that the tool is going to learn? And by 2020, we had GPT-3. So ChatGPT, which we're all familiar with, is a chat box on top of GPT. So in just a year later, it had 1.7 billion parameters. And GPT-4, which ChatGPT-4 is built on top of, actually, OpenAI has not told us how many parameters there are, but there are some estimates that it's as much as 100 trillion parameters. So I have a colleague of mine who says that, let's keep in mind that AI is the worst it's ever going to be today. So what it's going to be capable of in the future. And I guess the ultimate goal is that it will understand human speech as well as you and I can understand human speech. So, huge opportunities, but also challenges that we need to address.
That's a fascinating way to think about it, that it's the worst that it's going to be. Although I would say, and I'm sure a lot of people in this room will agree, I hope it gets better at writing CVs because they stink. They're horrible. Everyone's seen them. Sorry, a tangent. I go off on them. What I'd like to go to next is put you on the spot a little bit, and that's talk about examples that you've seen working with customers. How are they using AI to help with sustainability?
Yeah, I've got a few use cases that I wanted to share with you today. If I start with our science business, it's called Elsevier. We're one of the world's largest scientific information providers. And what we do in terms of helping our customers to advance science and health, technology, is to provide information. And we have a product which is called Scopus AI. It's the world's largest citations database. So it's everything that we produce plus everything that everybody else produces, but just in a kind of shortened format. And we think that we are one of the first companies to have a commercial generative AI product, which went out to market actually in our legal business last spring. Scopus AI launched last autumn. So things have been progressing, at a fairly steady pace. But what the Scopus product is designed to do, Scopus AI, is be able to take the query, whether you use that in scientific language or you just ask a very simple question, and to be able to bring all of that data to you quickly. Now, that's not a surprise, maybe, but what is absolutely at the center of what we do is that we can also cite sources. So in an open large language model, and it is scraping across the web, you may not know where that content came from, and it can often give rise to hallucinations. And there's a number of, funny instances, maybe worrying instances, where people relied on that those results to take a case, for example, to court, which the judge was able to determine that the case law that the lawyer was presenting was not actually, there was no case law that related to that. So you're doing a query search in Scopus AI, and it will tell you what that source material is, and then allow you to click in. And if I had to say something in terms of a phrase, with where we are today with generative AI, we can't check our brains at the door. We must do the same kinds of work that we have always done in terms of checking. Similarly, with Lexis Plus AI in our legal business, which is LexisNexis Legal and Professional, again, going through huge amounts of data, and that is unique proprietary content, so that our customers can be sure, as they are trying to advance the rule of law through their activities, whether they're judges, lawyers, that they can get robust content, and that they can click in and then get to that information a lot more quickly. And there's some really good examples. That overarching unique contribution that I mentioned that we're really passionate about, universal sustainable access to information. An example for us is our SDG Resource Center, which we launched in 2017. So 2 years after we were on site at the UN when the SDGs were adopted, just not in the main place, but in a hotel nearby. And we released a free piece of research because we were interested in how ready was science to support the SDGs, even though we didn't have a firm grasp on all of the targets that would underpin the SDGs. But when I was sitting there and my colleagues were listening to Richard Horton, my colleague who's the editor of The Lancet, present the findings as we'd asked him to do, we thought, okay, this is really just the beginning, because we know across our business, and if we invite key partners to participate as well, we can curate content, make it freely available on the SDGs. And one of the things that we've been doing as an initiative of the Resource Center, and last year we had over 220,000 unique users of the site, is to host an Inspiration Day. So everybody in the audience, I hope they'll go to RELX.com, see the SDG Resource Center link, and you can see highlights. And one of the things that we had was a session on AI and the rule of law. And one of our speakers was mentioning about in Brazil, for example, the ability to use AI for getting cases, low-level cases seen, things that might be quite common and don't really require, the sophistication of a higher content type case. So because the statistic was quite shocking about how many people who are seeking justice in Brazil will ever actually be able to have their case heard. So AI, this is a really important use case, which has the potential to accelerate the ability to advance some of the tenets that we feel, my colleagues at LexisNexis have created some fundamental aspects of the rule of law, and one of them is the access to remedy. We all deserve that fundamentally as part of our human condition, but if you can't get your case heard, well, or if it's being heard after many years, statutes of limitations move on, that's not only frustrating, but it can be damaging to society. So there are some very important use cases.
I'm very conscious we want to get some questions in before the end, Marcia, so I'm going to jump forward.
I talk too long.
No, I go off on tangents, blame me. Let's talk about the next decade. Let's talk about the future. How do you see AI evolving, particularly when it comes to sustainability goals?
So I think, getting to this ability to process large volumes of information very quickly, I think are, critical. And, for example, on the Inspiration Day, we had a session on AI in nature. So, what does AI have to do with nature? And we had Sasha Dench, who is a conservationist, and she's been doing her work over many years, but she talked about how AI will rapidly be able to accelerate something that she's interested, which is bird migration and the siting of power lines, because this hurts migratory birds. And there was before huge amounts of data that took long periods of time to collate, to analyze, but to be able to utilize this more quickly. And something I wanted to talk about in terms of the future of AI will actually be in terms of quantum computing. So, the traditional computing, classical computing, uses a 0 and 1 with a transistor in the middle. But quantum computing has that ability to hold the 0 and 1 together. So it's exponentially faster. It has all kinds of challenges to it in terms of instability of the data when you try to extract the data. But when you combine these two things together, it should be able to help us, particularly on environmental challenges, to be able to understand things about the grid and energy consumption patterns, weather patterns, cloud patterns, things that will help us for understanding a kind of reciprocity in the distribution of impact. And that's also critical as we talk about, the impact of AI on environmental issues.
Okay, right. Let's go to the room if we can, see if there's any questions. Are there any hands? There we go. I think the first one is over there. Thank you.
Hi, Angie Hobson. This is fantastic. It's called artificial intelligence. Yuval Harari is calling it alien intelligence. I like to call it aggregated information. So, for example, in the example in Brazil, isn't there a danger that we actually accelerate and embed biases at rapid speed? So in Brazil, in these cases, for example, there'd be huge social biases that might affect outcomes. So how do you deal with that as an organization who's part of accelerating and facilitating it, but in some case maybe embedding dangers?
Yes, absolutely. Such an important point, because there's a huge risk for bias and other things as well, in terms of the explainability of solutions and how they work. And one of the critical things is about having human oversight. So in the formation of our solutions, we use the experts that we've had to look at the prompts that are being developed to train the solutions. And that's a critical component. There's also external sources that you can use. And at Elsevier, I wrote it down because I wanted to get the name right. It's one of the things we use is called Quora's Insincere Questions Classification. So there are tools that are helping companies like mine to be able to detect and minimize bias. But one of the things that's really critical is, again, ensuring that there is human oversight, that also that we can cite sources. And one of the things that we're also doing is training the AI so that if there is no useful answer, we say there's no useful answer, as opposed to trying to create something that could be a plausible answer, but not an answer that is anchored into the actual, that you can bring back to the content. But 2 years ago, we launched the RELX Responsible AI Principles. We wanted to, tell the world, because we want, to be good citizens in developing this expertise and technology. And so, we've got 5 of them. And we've actually, I'll tell you what they are, but we also have made a public commitment in our corporate responsibility goals, which are available in our annual report, that we will update these principles this year. Because the principles as they existed 2 years ago, we weren't talking about generative AI. Now we are. And so we need to make sure that we do that. Or the instructions that we give to our people. We employ 36,500 people. Maybe not as big as some companies, but plenty big from my perspective. And we need to make sure that we're providing the appropriate guidance, tools, training to our people to know, how to use those. So the 5 that we have today are that, again, we consider the real world impact on people, that we take action to prevent bias, that we can explain how they work, as I've mentioned, human oversight, which I've also said, and that we respect privacy. That's the first one. It's the 5th one, and that we have robust data governance. For all of you, like in my company, it's great to have policies, statements, principles, but if you're not actually training the people to understand what they are, then it's really difficult to have action on that. So we have networks of colleagues, which are, it's an unfortunate name, it's called RAIDS, RELX AI and Data Science teams, and we're constantly working with them to make sure that we talk together, and we've been working on the update of these responsible AI principles during the course of the last 12 months.
Márcia, thank you. I know there were some other hands that went up, but I apologise. We are running a little tight on time, and just out of respect to the speakers that follow, we will have to move on. But Márcia, thank you so much for your time. Really enjoyed your company.
Thank you.